The stars were cold. Not just in the way space always had been, silent, vast, untouchable, but in the way they felt now. Empty. Dead. Watching. He stood alone in the middle of the control deck, boots locked to the grated floor, suit sealed tight. Outside the shattered observation window, what was left of humanity's fleet drifted like wreckage from a forgotten age. Twisted metal. Burned hulls. No distress calls. No survivors. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the audio feed, still hoping, still wishing, for another voice to break the silence. Static crackled, the only reply. He didn't turn off the channel. Maybe someone would still come through. Maybe someone else had made it. He was supposed to die with them. That was the plan. One last push. One desperate strike. All of Earth's remaining warships against the Triarch Dominion's siege line. It had worked, partially. The enemy lines had been broken, yes, but at a cost no species should ever have paid. Earth was gone. He hadn't seen it happen. His squadron had jumped early, hitting the flanks, but when the flash came through the black, blinding even from a distance, they all knew. The silence that followed said more than any scream ever could. He should have been with them. He should have burned with them. But now there was only him. The last human in the galaxy. And he didn't intend to go quietly. The Dominion had always underestimated humans. They thought of Earth as a stubborn, backward world on the edge of known space, too proud to surrender, too weak to matter. And for the most part they were right. Humanity had never been the strongest, the fastest, or the most advanced. Their ships were cobbled together with outdated tech, their colonies always one power failure away from collapse. Their alliances were short-lived. Their enemies were many. But what the Dominion never understood, what no species ever seemed to grasp, was that humans didn't stop. Not when they were wounded. Not when they were outnumbered. And definitely not when they had nothing left to lose. He hadn't slept in 3 days. The stim shots were barely working now, but he couldn't afford to rest. Every second counted. The Dominion patrols would be sweeping the region, hunting for stragglers. He was a ghost in their system, a glitch in the radar. But that wouldn't last. Sooner or later they'd find him. They always did. And when they did, they'd expect him to run. But he wasn't running anymore. He'd rigged the engines to overload on command. Half the storage bays were packed with antimatter charges. He'd used the last of his drone supply to scatter decoys across the asteroid belt. If he was going to die, he was going to make sure it meant something. One human. One ship. That's all that was left. And it was going to be enough. The ship was old, older than him probably. A corvette built for deep space surveys, retrofitted for combat during the early years of the war. Scars lined the hull where plasma rounds had carved their names. The portside thrusters wheezed with every course correction. Life support groaned like a tired lung. But it held. Somehow it always held. He ran his hands along the main console, feeling the warmth of the interface pads through his gloves. So many memories lived in these wires. Friends, comrades, brothers and sisters he'd fought beside. People who trusted him to carry the torch when they couldn't. People who still whispered in his ears during the quiet hours. He hadn't spoken aloud in days. There was no one left to talk to. But the ship listened. It always did. They'd called the Dominion unstoppable. 1,000 species united under a single banner. Each new world they absorbed only fed the machine. Every resistance crushed, every rebellion silenced. Even when humanity rose up, screaming into the void, no one listened. No one helped. He remembered the broadcast, the last one from Earth. A woman's voice, clear and defiant, echoing across all frequencies. We are not surrendering. We will never surrender. You may burn our skies, but you will never break our will. We are human. And we will endure. And then silence. Forever. He replayed that message more than he should have. He knew every pause, every hitch in her breath. He didn't even know her name, but it didn't matter. She spoke for all of them. And now she spoke for him. The last spark in a galaxy gone dark. Alarms flared. His body snapped into motion before thought caught up. Hands on controls. Eyes scanning. Thrusters firing. He didn't need to check the source, he knew what it was. A Dominion hunter probe had picked up his trail. He jerked the ship into a spin, ducking low through the asteroid belt. Metal screamed as a rock the size of a shuttle scraped against the hull. The ship bucked but held. Behind him the probe gave chase, small, fast, relentless. He rerouted power from shields to rear cannons. Just one shot. That's all he'd get. The targeting display flickered red. Come on. He held his breath. Fingers danced across the console. The probe grew larger on the screen, closing fast. He fired. The beam cut through the dark like a blade, slicing the probe clean in two. For a moment, silence. Then a bloom of fire lit the asteroid field, and debris scattered in every direction. He exhaled slowly. That was just a scout. The real ships would be next. He had maybe 15 minutes. 20 if the Dominion was sloppy. It wasn't enough time. But it would have to do. He opened the weapons cache. Pulled what was left. 3 warheads, 1 functional railgun, 2 repair drones converted into floating bombs. It wasn't much, but he wasn't planning on surviving the next fight. He checked the engine overload system again. Still primed. This wasn't a mission. It was a message. A warning. A promise. They took everything. His planet. His people. His future. And now he was going to take something back. He launched the decoys. Dozens of sensor ghosts scattered like sparks into the belt, each one mimicking his ship's signature. The Dominion would waste time hunting shadows while he lined up his final strike. He found the flagship on long-range scans, an Apex-class carrier over a kilometer long, shielded from bow to stern. Surrounded by escorts. Probably carrying a full battalion. Perfect. He smiled and the expression felt foreign. Like something from another life. A life with laughter. A life with others. He could almost hear their voices again. You're crazy. He's not crazy. He's just human. Same thing. He set a course. Straight for the heart of the fleet. He wasn't going to turn back. Not now. Not ever. The Dominion had spent years trying to wipe his kind from existence. And they had almost succeeded. Almost. But they forgot one thing. Humans fight best when they're already dead inside. And he had nothing left to lose. The carrier grew larger in the display. Escort ships fanned out, scanning. One by one, the decoys lured them off course, dragged them away from formation. Confusion rippled through the fleet. He was inside their perimeter before they even knew he was real. The alarms on his ship were screaming. Lock warnings. Shield breakdowns. Proximity alerts. He ignored them all. Focus. Just a little closer. They finally spotted him. Too late. Railgun fire tore through his ship. The hull groaned. Fires lit the hallway behind the command deck. His suit's pressure seals hissed as oxygen thinned. Still he flew. Straight toward the center of the carrier. 500 meters. 400. Another hit, this time to the engine core. His ship staggered. Lights dimmed. Consoles flickered. 300. He keyed in the final command. Overload sequence engaged. 200. He stood, eyes locked on the forward display. Flames behind him. Metal screaming around him. 100. The Dominion captain's face flickered onto his screen, scaled, cold-eyed, confident. You are alone, human, the alien said. You have lost. He met the stare. And smiled. Not yet. 50. The countdown reached its final stage. 10 seconds. 9. 8. He closed his eyes. And remembered Earth. The forests. The oceans. The sky after the rain. The people. The hope. The fire. 3. 2. 1. And then. The transmission cut off. No explosion. No signal. Just silence. In the depths of space, the Dominion flagship drifted. No damage. No sign of attack. Just quiet. For a long time no one spoke. Then the sensors pinged. Something was moving. Slowly. Quietly. A single human escape pod. Still warm. Still active. Still alive. But that couldn't be. He was supposed to be dead. Wasn't he? The pod drifted through the wreckage, slow and silent, like it didn't belong. It had no weapons. No shields. Not even a distress beacon. Just a faded emblem on the side, 3 stars in a triangle pattern, barely visible beneath the scorched plating. The mark of the Earth fleet. Inside, dim emergency lights flickered. Wires sparked. The air was thin, recycled too many times. And strapped into the single crash seat, slumped forward and barely breathing, was the man who shouldn't have survived. The Dominion's recovery skiffs were the first to reach him. No resistance. No trap. They circled the pod like scavengers waiting for movement. But the human didn't stir. His face was pale. His pulse low. He looked dead. But he wasn't. The decision to take him alive wasn't unanimous. Dominion protocol was clear. No prisoners from Earth. Too dangerous. Too unpredictable. But this one had destroyed a destroyer-class escort, slipped past 3 patrol lines, and nearly crashed into a carrier without dying. They wanted to know how. So they brought him in. They strapped him down deep inside one of their cruisers. Sealed the room with 10 inches of composite armor. Posted guards outside. The Dominion didn't believe in mercy, but they did believe in answers. And they had questions. The first time he opened his eyes, everything was white. He blinked against the lights, groaning as pain surged through his body. His vision swam. Something heavy wrapped around his chest. His mouth was dry. His ears rang. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. A shadow moved beyond the glass. One of them. He remembered the face. Cold. Scale. Eyes like polished stone. He'd seen that look before, on every battlefield, every ruined outpost, every colony the Dominion had burned. The alien leaned closer, speaking in a low, even tone. "We pulled you from the wreck. You should be dead." The human coughed. Laughed a little, though it hurt. "Should be," he rasped. The alien narrowed its eyes. "You disabled a warship. You escaped a kill zone. You survived a core breach. No other human has done this. How?" He didn't answer. The alien tried again. "What was your objective?" Silence. "What is your fleet's location?" Still nothing. Then, softly through cracked lips, the human said, "Gone. Like everything else." The alien paused. Then tilted its head. "Why are you still fighting?" He looked up, gaze sharp. "Because you haven't won." The Dominion officer stared at him for a moment longer, then stepped away. They changed tactics after that. Rotated interrogators. Cut the rations. Turned the heat down, the lights up. Played recordings of Earth's surrender call, looped again and again. But he didn't break. He wouldn't. Because there was no one left to fight for. Only something left to fight against. The Dominion didn't understand that. They thought humans were like the others. If you destroyed their homes, killed their leaders, took their future, they'd fall apart. But humans were different. Pain didn't make them weaker. It made them louder. And this last one, they'd pulled him from the fire expecting ashes. Instead they got a spark. And that was the mistake. The Dominion tried to study him. Monitored brain patterns. Measured hormone shifts. Analyzed his DNA. They thought maybe there was something special about him. Some mutation, some anomaly. But the truth was simpler. He wasn't different. He was just human. That was what made him dangerous. They put him in a cell the size of a closet. No windows. Just white walls and recycled air. For weeks he didn't see the stars. Didn't hear another voice. Just his own breath. His own thoughts. Sometimes, in the dark, he remembered the faces. His crew. His friends. His family. The ones who had laughed with him. Bled with him. Died with him. He remembered the way they looked when the order came in, the final mission. The last stand. No backup. No return trip. Just one shot to hurt the enemy so badly they'd never forget Earth existed. Some had cried. Some had prayed. He just smiled and said, "Let's make it count." Now he was the only one left to carry that weight. And even in a prison cell, cuffed and half-starved, he still held it tight. But something had changed. The Dominion wasn't sure what to do with him. They kept expecting answers. Kept expecting fear. But he gave them silence. Until the rumors started. At first, whispers. Then more. That he wasn't alone after all. That another signal had been detected. Faint, encrypted, buried in debris fields too far to reach. The Dominion dismissed it as static. But he knew better. It wasn't just noise. It was a code. Human. And it was getting stronger. The Dominion scrambled their scouts. Sent cloaked frigates into the old battle zones. But the signal kept shifting. Moving. Hiding. Just like humans did. The man in the cell didn't say a word. Didn't smile. Didn't even blink when the interrogators brought it up. But deep down something flickered. Hope. It wasn't possible. Earth was gone. The fleet was dead. The colonies crushed. But still someone was out there. He wasn't the last. Not yet. They increased his surveillance. The Dominion feared what would happen if he escaped. Feared what he knew. But it wasn't what he knew that mattered. It was what he believed. That's what scared them. They tried to move him. A different facility. Deeper space. Fewer risks. But the transport never arrived. Because something else did. A burst of static. Then a voice. Echo 7, signal acquired. Package confirmed. Dominion comms scrambled. Officers shouted. Security scrambled to raise shields. But it was too late. The stars lit up. Something exploded near the outer ring. A ship, small, fast, running dark. No signature. No ID. Just a single human code embedded in the noise. The Dominion panicked. They sent half the fleet after it. But that was the trick. The real threat wasn't the ship. It was the signal it carried. It wasn't a rescue. It was a warning. We're still here. The man in the cell looked up for the first time in days. He couldn't see the explosion, but he felt it, deep in his bones. He leaned his head back against the wall, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he smiled. They didn't understand. They thought they'd buried humanity under the ashes of its own fire. But they'd missed the point. Fire doesn't die when it runs out of wood. It dies when it runs out of air. And someone, somewhere, was breathing again. The Dominion tried to tighten their grip, but it was already too late. The spark was back. And sparks spread. More whispers followed. A relay station in the Orion Fringe, destroyed. A Dominion supply run ambushed, by ships running obsolete Earth code. A mining post on Cerex 9, abandoned, the walls scrawled with human words. We remember. The human in the cell watched it all unfold from a grainy screen in the corner of his room. And the smile never left his face. They still didn't know how he'd survive the carrier attack. No pod should have held together. No human should have lived through that kind of blast. But maybe survival wasn't the point. Maybe sacrifice wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning. Because now the galaxy wasn't silent anymore. Now they were afraid. Dominion patrols changed their routes. Troop transports doubled their escorts. The name Earthborn started to surface again in Dominion briefings, at first as a caution, then as a threat. It was more than one human now. It was a shadow, a whisper, a movement, and he had lit the match. He didn't know where the others were, didn't know how many, but they were out there, hiding, waiting, striking, just like he had. One ship, one voice, one fire. He remembered the words from that last broadcast before the silence. We are not surrendering. We will never surrender. The Dominion had laughed then. They weren't laughing anymore. They came to him one final time. No guards. No weapons. Just questions. What do you want? The alien asked, voice cold. He didn't answer at first. Then he looked the creature dead in the eye and said, Justice. The lights dimmed. Far outside the prison something moved again. Another burst. Another voice. More static but clearer now. Closer. And this time, it was saying his name. The voice on the comms repeated his name. What? Then again. Louder. He sat motionless in the corner of his cell, listening. Heart pounding. For weeks, maybe months, he hadn't heard a voice that wasn't trying to break him. But this was different. This was human. The static broke for a second, and through it came a word that hit harder than any strike the Dominion ever threw. Command. He stood. No one in the cell with him. No one outside the door yet either. Just that voice. Just that impossible word. Repeat transmission, he whispered, half afraid the moment would vanish. Silence. Then a soft buzz. And a whisper. Evac in motion. Stand by. He took a step toward the door. The lights overhead flickered. Somewhere far above the prison level, alarms started to wail. Not Dominion sirens. Different. Urgent. They'd come. Whoever was left, whatever was left, they'd found him. Somehow. Some way. And now they were coming to get him out. He backed up as the door to his cell clicked. Then again. Metal grinding. The Dominion systems were trying to override. Lock everything down. Keep him inside. But something was wrong. Something was fighting back. The door groaned, then snapped open with a hiss of cold air. No guards. No escort. Only smoke. And footsteps echoing down the corridor. He stepped out slowly. There was a body on the ground. Dominion officer. Mask twisted sideways. His weapon had been fired, but not fast enough. Far down the hallway, lights snapped and died. Shadows flickered. Someone else was moving. And not just one. Two. Maybe three. Fast. Silent. They didn't speak. Didn't stop. Just moved through the station like ghosts. Human ghosts. He followed. It didn't feel real. But nothing about this war ever had. The Dominion prison was falling apart from the inside. Hallways darkened. Gravity wobbled. Heat levels dropped. Power cells hissed and burst like veins tearing open. Whatever system had been jammed open to get him out, it wasn't clean. This was a rush job. Desperate. Last minute. The kind of plan only humans would try. He turned a corner just as another blast echoed behind him. The walls shook. Lights shattered. A Dominion security drone clipped the wall and slammed into the floor in flames. Someone ahead signaled him. 2 fingers raised, pointed left. He didn't know who it was. Couldn't even see their face under the mask. But the gesture was unmistakable. Follow me. So he did. Each step was chaos. Another collapsed bulkhead. Another firefight behind a sealed door. A screaming alarm echoing down a hallway slick with coolant and sparks. And above it all, the low rumble of something massive moving outside. Not inside the station. Outside. He felt it through the floor. Rhythmic. Like something ancient waking up. Then a voice cut across the comms again. Breacher incoming. 17 seconds. Brace. He didn't have to ask what that meant. They weren't here for a stealth extraction. They were tearing the place down. And if he didn't make it to the evac point, he'd be buried with it. His guide, whoever they were, shoved open a side door and pushed him through. The air was freezing. His skin burned from the cold. This section had been depressurized at some point and only half sealed again. They passed 2 more bodies. Dominion soldiers. Throats crushed. No gunfire. Silent kills. Whoever was here, they weren't new at this. The next corner opened into a wider platform. Half of it collapsed, the rest cracked down the middle. A loading deck. And above them, through the broken dome overhead, stars. Real stars. For the first time since Earth fell, he saw open space again. And rising into that broken view, black and gleaming, was a ship. Not a Dominion warbird. Not one of theirs. This was human. Slick. Sharp-lined. Designed for speed and violence. It didn't fly like the others. It moved like it hated everything between it and the stars. And it was coming down. Fire burst from its engines. Side thrusters flared. A breaching spike on the bottom of the hull began to glow white-hot. The platform shook under his feet as it got closer. Behind him, more footsteps. More voices. Not his allies. Dominion troops had caught on. Gunfire ripped through the far wall. The guide was hit, spun sideways into cover. Another figure darted in and dragged them back, returning fire in short bursts. Go! The masked soldier shouted at him. He didn't wait. Didn't think. Just ran. The edge of the platform was in sight now. He could see the boarding clamps. The retractable chute. But they hadn't deployed yet. They were waiting until the last possible second. Another explosion ripped through the structure. One of the bulkheads split clean down the middle. He ducked low and rolled behind a crate as plasma fire scorched the air inches above his head. Where is that chute? He shouted into the comms. 5 seconds. He didn't have 5. Another Dominion trooper surged from the smoke, weapon raised. He dove for the side, grabbed a length of cable hanging from the ceiling, and swung hard across the gap. His shoulder slammed into a wall. He tumbled, rolled, barely kept his feet. Then click. The chute dropped. Metal arms extended. The dock tube slammed down and sealed. The outer hatch opened. He ran again. But this time as he reached it, something grabbed him from behind. A Dominion enforcer, twice his size, 4 arms, armor-plated. He twisted, slammed an elbow back. No effect. The enforcer lifted him off the ground. He felt his ribs crack. But then, another burst. A shot from the shadows. The enforcer's head snapped sideways. It staggered, loosened its grip. He didn't hesitate. Reached down, grabbed the edge of the hatch, and threw himself inside. Someone pulled him the rest of the way. The tube retracted. The ship engines roared. The stars spun. He lay on the floor, gasping, heart racing. Above him, another face. Human. Mask pulled back. A woman with a scar across her chin and eyes that didn't blink much. You're heavier than you look, she said. He coughed out something like a laugh. The ship turned, nose first toward open space. Behind them, the Dominion station erupted. Not from weapons fire. From inside. Something had gone off. Something big. The entire complex folded inward and split like glass under pressure. The woman pulled him to his feet. We've got minutes, not hours. Strap in. He followed her through narrow halls to the cockpit. 3 other crew. All human. All silent. Focused. The ship climbed fast. Faster than he remembered ships ever moving. He saw the readout on the screen. Scrambled ID, falsified signatures, fake Dominion pings. They weren't flying clean. They were flying smart. We picked up your pod signature months ago, the pilot said over her shoulder. Didn't know if you were alive. He nodded slowly. I wasn't sure either. Any info we need to know? Coordinates? Contingencies? He stared at the star map ahead. Just one thing, he said. They're listening now. The crew tensed. Meaning? He looked around the cabin. At the people who had risked everything to pull him out. The ones who'd broken into a Dominion black site on the edge of known space just to recover one man. They know we're not gone. No one spoke for a long second. Then the woman smiled. Good. The alarms pinged again. Multiple incoming signatures. Dominion warships. Big ones. The smile faded. How many? He checked the screen. Too many. They're betting we can't outrun them, he said. They're wrong, the pilot muttered, flipping switches. No, he said quietly. They're not. Not if they've got a trap waiting. Another silence. Then he leaned forward and tapped the NAV screen. But maybe we let them chase us. The pilot blinked. You want to get caught? Not caught, he said. Cornered. He pointed to a sector of space along the outer fringe. Dense with magnetic fields and ion storms. No clear routes. No safe jumps. Here. The pilot stared at it. That's a graveyard. He looked at her. It's where we make a stand. The Dominion fleet was closing fast. Their signatures were unmistakable. Flagships. Interceptors. Long-range carriers. All converging on one tiny human vessel. One ship. One crew. And one man who should have been dead a dozen times over. The pilot glanced back at him. You really think it's worth it? He stared out the window, past the stars, to the invisible weight pressing down on all of them. The galaxy watched us burn, he said. And now they'll watch us rise. The Dominion ships came into visual range. It was time. But not for running. Not this time. The stars outside shifted. And behind the human vessel, far behind, just beyond Dominion sensors, dozens of faint pings lit up in the void. Not Dominion. Not alien. Human. Ships with no names. Signals that shouldn't exist. And engines warming. Waiting for the call. Waiting for the last stand to begin. The silence didn't last long. A sharp ping echoed through the cockpit. Not Dominion. Not human either. The pilot froze, fingers hovering above the throttle. She glanced at the screen. The crew leaned in closer, trying to make sense of it. The ship's AI stuttered for a second, blinking uncertain symbols across the interface like it didn't know what it was seeing. Then the ping repeated, stronger this time. Clear. It wasn't just a signal. It was a voice. But not in any language they knew. The scarred woman turned to him. Her face pale now, jaw locked. That's not Dominion tech. He nodded slowly, his gut already turning cold. I know. Another crew member spoke up from the back. That frequency, it's bouncing off every relay we've got. Doesn't match anything in the archive. Because it's not from the archive, he said. It's from the fringe. Someone cursed under their breath. They'd all heard the stories. The fringe wasn't just unexplored, it was avoided. Deep space anomalies. Ships that vanished. Ghost signals and impossible physics. Dominion called it unclassified space. Humans called it the dead edge. But whatever was pinging them now had crossed that line. And it was coming closer. One of the scanners started screaming, proximity alert, but the ship wasn't detecting anything visual. No heat. No movement. Just distortion. Space bending and unbending like it was breathing. The Dominion fleet hadn't slowed. In fact, they were speeding up. The ships were forcing them toward it, herding them straight into the unknown. They're not chasing us, the woman said, her voice hollow now. They're pushing us. He felt his blood run cold. That meant one thing. They knew what was waiting in the fringe. They knew, and they were willing to sacrifice an entire human strike team just to let it loose. The comms crackled again. This time the strange voice came through the static more clearly. Still no words. Just tones. Pulses. Then a flash. Just one. But enough to light up every sensor in the cockpit. Out in the dark, space twisted. Not like a jump drive. Not like any engine. This was alive. It unfolded. Massive. Wrong. Shimmering. Not Dominion. Not human. Not even mechanical. The crew fell silent. Even the AI stopped processing data, systems frozen, unsure how to label what they were looking at. It wasn't a ship. It was more like a presence. A thing. A shape that shifted too quickly for eyes to follow. Then it moved. Not toward them. Toward the Dominion fleet. Without warning, the first Dominion warship shattered. No fire. No beam. Just gone. Like someone had snapped their fingers and erased it from space. The others tried to scatter, but it didn't matter. The presence touched them one by one. And each time, space folded like wet paper. Each time, something vanished. A whole fleet blinking out like dying stars. And still, the human ship remained untouched. The pilot stared at him. Her voice barely a whisper now. What is that? He didn't answer right away. Because he'd seen it once before. Not with his eyes, but in the deepest Dominion databanks. Hidden footage. Suppressed records. Stuff he was never supposed to access. It's what they found before the war, he said finally. The reason they came for Earth in the first place. The scarred woman's eyes widened. It's not us they fear, he said. It's what we woke up. And the thing out there, it wasn't finished. The pulsing signal hit again, stronger now, so loud it shook the ship. The crew screamed and clutched their heads. Except him. Because this time he understood it. Not in words. Not in thoughts. But in meaning. The presence wasn't hunting humans. It was calling them. The Dominion hadn't tried to destroy humanity for power. They were trying to keep something locked away. Something that only responded to a human signature. Something older than any empire. Something buried deep beyond the stars, waiting for someone foolish enough, brave enough, to step far enough from home and hear it. The signal stopped. All at once. The air went still. And every human ship that had been waiting in the dark, the ones with no names, no IDs, no official flight paths, lit up. All together. Every one of them received the same message. Not a command. Not a map. But a choice. And he knew it as clearly as he knew his own name. They could run. Or they could answer. If they ran, maybe they'd live a little longer. But if they answered, the war would change. Not just against the Dominion. Not just for survival. But for everything. And the presence, that impossible shape still twisting out in the void, it was waiting. The pilot was staring at him now, shaking her head. "We're not ready for this," she whispered. He turned toward the screen. "No," he said softly. "But we never were." Out the window the stars shifted again. And for a second, just a heartbeat, he saw a shape hidden inside the light. Humanoid. Massive. Looking back. And smiling. Then it vanished. And behind him, every ship in the human fleet turned toward the fringe. Toward the signal. Toward whatever was waiting. The war had started as a fight for Earth. But now it was something more. The real enemy had just stepped out of the dark. And it had been listening all along. They reached the edge of the fringe just as the last Dominion beacon went dark. No more ships behind them. No more warnings. Just silence. And the pulsing light that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The crew barely spoke now. Faces pale, eyes wide. Every one of them had seen the impossible. Ships turned to ash without fire. Voices in the dark. A presence that moved without mass, thought without words, waited without fear. Still no one turned back. The human fleet, battered and broken, pushed deeper into the void. Every jump they made took them farther from what anyone had called real. Gravity bent. Time stretched. Some scanners stopped working altogether. But they kept going. Because the message never stopped. A single thought echoed over and over. Keep coming. And then they saw it. The source. At first it looked like a star, burning low and cold in the center of a dead zone. But it wasn't giving off light, it was pulling it in. A shadow so dense it bent the colors of the universe around it. At its heart was a shape. Massive. Humanoid. Still. The presence. It had waited here long enough. The pilot slowed the ship and turned to him. Her voice shook. "What now?" He stood, eyes fixed on the shape. Every nerve in his body said to run, but some deeper part, the part that had survived every battle, every loss, told him to stay. "We go to it." She didn't argue. No one did. As they drifted forward, the shape began to rise. It didn't move with engines or sound. It just was. Like it had always been there, hidden under the skin of the galaxy, waiting to be seen again. Other ships followed. Hundreds. Thousands. Humans who'd heard the signal. Who'd risked everything to get here. Soldiers. Refugees. Scientists. Pilots. No ranks. No flags. Just people. And every one of them knew that something was about to happen that would never be undone. The shape opened its arms. Not in welcome. In choice. And something inside the ship changed. The air got warmer. Softer. The lights dimmed like a memory trying to fade. And then he heard it again. That voice. Only now it was his own voice, echoing from somewhere inside him. Not words. Not orders. Questions. "Will you lead?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Because something deep inside him already was. It pulled at him like gravity. Not just toward the presence, but into it. The cockpit blurred. The crew shouted, but their voices faded. And then he wasn't in the ship anymore. He was standing in a place with no up, no down, no air, and yet he could breathe. Could move. Could feel. And around him, the presence stood taller than stars. It reached out. And touched him. But not his body. His memories. His grief. His rage. It saw everything. The cities lost. The battles fought. The people who died with names that would never be spoken again. It felt them. And for a moment, it seemed to mourn with him. Then it showed him its memory. He gasped. Worlds, countless, ancient, falling to fire. Civilizations erased not by war but by a choice. One species long ago had reached too far, had woken the same presence, and it had followed them, had merged with them, until they were gone. It wasn't a weapon, it was a reflection, a mirror held up to whoever found it. And now it had found humanity. He fell to his knees. I didn't mean to bring them here. The presence didn't answer with words. Instead it split into thousands of threads of light, each wrapping itself around the ships waiting outside the void, around the humans who had come so far. It wasn't destroying them, it was becoming them, or letting them become it. They would not be tools. They would not be prey. They would change. One by one the ships began to glow. Inside the people felt it, not power, not control, but something deeper. Understanding. Not of war. Not of peace. Of balance. Of being part of something larger than just survival. Then the Dominion fleet returned. Not all of it, but enough. A desperate final wave breaking through the last of the barriers. They hadn't stopped coming. Hadn't given up on wiping the humans out. Only now they weren't chasing broken ships. They were flying into something they couldn't name. The first Dominion ship opened fire. But the beam stopped before it hit. Caught in midair. Held. And then turned back. One blast, just one, ripped the lead ship in half. The others paused. For the first time in decades of war, Dominion ships hesitated. And from the human fleet something answered. Not weapons. Not missiles. Voices. Every ship sang. Not music. Not noise. But signal. Emotion. Unity. The presence was no longer one shape. It had become many. And humanity, stubborn and wounded and angry and alive, had become something the Dominion had never expected. Unbreakable. The Dominion tried to retreat. But the presence didn't follow. Just watched. The message was clear. This war wasn't about conquest anymore. It was about choice. And the Dominion had made theirs. So had humanity. The last Dominion ship turned and jumped. And silence fell again. Inside his ship he opened his eyes. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. He looked at the crew. They were staring at their hands. At the lights in the cabin. At each other. Different. Not stronger. Not faster. Just clearer. The presence had left something behind in each of them. Not control. Not command. But memory. And possibility. The war was over. Not in fire. But in understanding. Not all humans would choose to follow the presence. Not all would want it. But the choice was theirs now. That was the point. They were no longer pawns in someone else's plan. Not the Dominions. Not even the stars. They were free. The pilot turned to him. Tears in her eyes. What do we do now? He smiled softly. Whatever we want. Then the lights dimmed again. And a signal came through. No. Unfamiliar. But human. A call from deep inside the galaxy. Not for help. Not for war. For home. Someone out there had heard what they'd done. Someone wanted to know what came next. And just before he answered the call, a final pulse flickered across the console. A symbol. Half human. Half something else. And beneath it just 3 words. The transmission echoed through the cabin, quiet but unmistakable. A voice speaking standard, old and dusty, crackling with static, but human. That alone was enough to still the air on the bridge. The pilot leaned forward. The comms officer, trembling, tapped the panel again, replaying the message. To any survivors, we saw the light. We're listening. We're not alone. It wasn't from the Dominion. It wasn't the presence. It was something else. Hope. He sat in the command seat again, hands clasped, eyes fixed on the viewport. The stars ahead didn't look the same anymore. Not after everything. They shimmered like they were watching back. Like they knew. He didn't need a mission briefing anymore. The war was over. The orders were gone. What remained was choice. And healing. He gave the order to set course toward the source of the message. The fleet responded silently, thousands of ships pivoting in unison. There was no need to speak. They all felt it. The same pull, the same curiosity, the same chance to start something new. They jumped. What they found wasn't a city. It wasn't a battleground. It wasn't even a station. It was a garden. A single, massive biosphere floating in deep space, grown around the shattered hull of an old freighter. Plants climbed steel beams. Roots pushed through old alloy. Light shimmered from sunlamps patched together from wreckage. It was messy, unplanned, barely holding together. But it was alive. And the people who came out to greet them, their faces said everything. Human. Worn, thin, eyes wide with disbelief. Survivors. Explorers. Maybe even exiles. They'd seen the light just like everyone else. And they hadn't run. They'd made something instead. Something that could grow. He stepped out first. They didn't bow. They hugged him. Tears followed. Not from fear. Not from pain. From relief. He didn't have a speech. He didn't need one. The look in their eyes told him enough. They were waiting for someone to tell them they hadn't been forgotten. That what they built mattered. And now they knew. Days passed. Then weeks. Ships landed. Crews stepped out. Soldiers became builders. Pilots became teachers. Some took off again to explore. But most stayed. Not because they had to. Because they chose to. A council formed. Not of generals. Not of rulers. Of people. They didn't need a capital or borders. Just agreements. Mutual respect. Memory. Some Dominion prisoners who had been captured and left behind were brought to the surface. People held their breath. But the soldiers didn't raise weapons. They offered food. And the prisoners, tired, confused, alone, accepted. Because even they had seen it. The light. The presence hadn't destroyed the Dominion. It had shown them something they couldn't understand. Something that haunted them in silence. A mirror. One that couldn't be escaped. Not everyone stayed. The pilot, his second in command, left after a month. She had family on the outer moons. Said she needed to see if they were still out there. She hugged him before leaving. "You gave us a future," she said. "Now I'm going to live in it." Others followed her. Some in search of home. Others in search of new stories. He remained. The garden station became something else entirely. A hub. A library. A haven. A place where memories were preserved, not just of what they survived but of who they were before the war. Kids were born there. They grew up asking questions. Not about weapons. About stars. About the old Earth stories. About why the galaxy had once been so afraid of humans. He told them the truth. Because we never gave up. One boy asked him if the presence was still out there. He smiled gently. "Always. But it won't come again unless it's needed. It doesn't command. It waits. Like a lighthouse." The boy didn't fully understand. He wasn't supposed to. Not yet. Time passed. He grew old. The fleet changed. Ships rusted. Some were turned into housing. Some taken apart. Others still roamed, bearing the human emblem, half flesh, half light. A new banner. It meant unity. Not dominance. Not surrender. Choice. And one day, without warning, the light returned. Just a shimmer on the horizon. A pulse in the dark. Not a threat. An invitation. The next generation watched it in awe. They didn't tremble. They didn't hide. They waved. He sat on the highest deck, overlooking the gardens below, breathing in air that still tasted of earth and fire. He knew what it meant. The presence hadn't come to change them again. It had come to listen. He whispered to the sky. "We're still here. Still trying. Still human." And for the first time in a long time he felt the galaxy breathe with him. No more battles. No more last stands. Just life. That was humanity's greatest strength all along. Not in the way they fought, but in the way they healed. The ships would still fly. New stars would still rise. Questions would still be asked. But the answer had already been written in the dark. One human. One ship. One last stand. And the beginning of everything that came after. Not an ending, but a beginning. One the galaxy would never forget.